Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Ektron Office Hours in the new year. Happy New Year to everybody. Today we're going to be talking about internet security, web security, a little bit about what's been going on over the last couple of months. In the context of that, I think it's really the perfect time to have this conversation. So with that, if anybody has any questions, security related, we'll answer what we can. I don't think any of us will claim to be security experts, although we've been around long enough to have some knowledge, so we'll answer what we can. Just tweet out your questions over Twitter using the hashtag EktronOH. And of course, if you have questions that are not related to the topic of the day, please send those through as well. So with that, Chris, I'll let you kick things off.
Sure, James. My name is Chris Jocks. I manage the web development team at Johnson & Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island. Been working as an Ektron developer for going on 7 years now.
Great, glad to have you. And David.
My name is David Artemick. I work for Celerity, who happens to work with Ektron, and I have a pretty decent past with Ektron over several years.
Right. And Jay.
I'm Jay Burling. I'm the Director of Web Application Development at Hendrix College. And we've been using Ektron for a long, long time.
For a long, long time. And one of the very first responsive sites on Ektron. I'll give you guys credit for that. And you've got a nice trophy behind you as well. Next to the admittedly more powerful
Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah. It's hard to compete with Thanos on any level. All right, so security. Like I said, I think there's been enough going on lately that this is a good and appropriate time to talk about security. Anybody who was connected to the internet a month ago is very familiar with the fact that Sony got hacked over the interview. We don't need to go into politics about it or anything, but it raises a real concern, and especially if you go and read blogs about security. My favorite security guru to follow is Troy Hunt. If you're not following him on Twitter, then you're doing something wrong. You need to be on Twitter and you need to be following Troy because it's often a good time. He doesn't hold anything back when he's talking about security, especially if it's a larger enterprise organization, a household brand who's failing at security. But he had some really good comments about that in particular, like don't assume that Sony is the exception to the rule and they got hacked because they're doing something wrong, or that because they're doing something exceptionally wrong. What if everybody's doing the same things wrong that Sony's been doing wrong, which I think is a very real problem to address. And then in the last week or two, Chick-fil-a had an issue where credit payment information was getting taken out of their databases, and even I think just yesterday, President Obama was at the FTC talking about the need for increased identity protection, consumer protection. No matter whether you like the president or not, I mean, it's clear that this is a major concern. Everybody's talking about it. So with that, I'd like to also bring up a little bit of a confession. Over the holidays, the developer.ektron.com site we disabled logins on the site for a couple of weeks, which happened to coincide with my vacation time because I'm the manager of the site. So logins were disabled while I was out because somebody was posting a lot of call girl stuff. We don't allow images, so there wasn't a whole lot to see, but that was a fun problem to come back to, which is if you've been on lately, you'll notice that there has been some reCAPTCHA implemented on the site, and that would be why. So this is a lot of things adding up to, hey, we probably should have a conversation around security pretty soon. So David, I know you have been looking at the documentation a little bit and could probably, I think some good advice around that. So I'll let you kind of get started with talking about just the initial best practices with Ektron.
All right. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people overlook when they're setting stuff up is the security. I mean, we get set in a pattern with putting together a quick developer site or something, and then throwing it out there and testing it once everything gets underway and gets finished, and then people forget, oh my goodness, I forgot to change the admin password, for instance. So one of my recommendations to people is after you get it installed and you're happy with the way that it's running, or just at least satisfied with the way that it's running for the time being, take a look at the reference guide. I'm going to tweet out a link to it here in a minute, and people can look at it. But it's commonly overlooked to go in and do things as simple as change the admin password, or even modify the permissions on folders. When I worked in support with Ektron, one of the things we did is we would go in and we would check the permissions on the website root, or some of the folders the Ektron Windows Service has to touch. And every now and then you'd see people, when they were troubleshooting things, set it to everyone having access, and that's just a nightmare to maintain. So it's important to make sure that you're restricting the permissions where you can, and restricting access where you can too. And the documentation actually has some good tips in there, some simple tips at first, and then it also has some additional stuff that you don't even think about, like enabling cookie encryption, or setting up SSL if you can do that.
Right, and Jay, you mentioned before we went live that you're going to go full on SSL on your site, all HTTPS all the time.
Right, we actually did that right after the I guess it was Beast came out, or was it Poodle? One of those two. We went full HTTPS just to prevent any potential problems with security issues with encryption and man-in-the-middle attacks and things like that. So it wasn't too bad. Once you get your security certificate set up, you can use in IIS anyway. You can use the URL rewrite module to redirect all requests for HTTP files to HTTPS files. It's not that bad, and it doesn't really appreciably add any slowdown we found to your viewing. The other thing is, I guess this was about 6 months ago or more, Google said that they'd start promoting HTTPS only sites slightly higher in their ranking systems, so that's something else to think about.
Yeah, there's a benefit for SEO, and Google has gone SSL only with all of their properties. And you can, the data is kind of old now, but even a few years ago when they started doing that, they said there was no appreciable difference, no significant difference in the load on the servers, etc. To do that, I think the hardware is up to a point now where if you're going to do SSL, just go full board with it. Don't pick and choose your pages. Just go ahead and secure the whole site. But it's also important to know that that's not where you should stop. So I know that Ken actually tweeted out that the Ektron installation. So if you're doing a fresh, I think we started this in 9.0, but if you're doing a fresh install of the CMS, then you cannot set the password for the admin user to admin, or the built-in user to built-in. And we've actually made more updates to that since then, because people make bad decisions, and it's just everyday people that like us who make these bad decisions on occasion. Because we saw people were typing in built-in for the admin password and admin for the built-in password. So it was admin built-in admin, which is, come on, let's be a little bit smarter about it. I know passwords are hard to remember, especially if you have to change them often and stuff. I've started using a password manager myself, and wherever it makes sense, and it doesn't always make sense to do it, but I generate passwords and store them in that. So for the most part, I only have to remember one password for 80 to 100 accounts that I have.
And most of the password managing software sites are allowing two-factor authentication now too, which makes it a little bit nicer. So.
It does, yeah. I'm using that for my Google account, and I know, Jay, you're interested in implementing that. Could you tell us where you're implementing that and why?
Well, I'm interested in learning about trying to set up a solution to use it for our internal student and faculty and staff portal, just because it gives that extra level of security to it. That way your users' passwords don't have to be the end-all be-all line of protection. They'll have that other line of the actual two-factor component that will help them be a little bit more protected than they would have been otherwise.
Yeah, I think that the one thing we can safely say is that people do not you do passwords correctly. And that's something that the two-factor authentication will definitely improve.
There's
Yeah, go ahead. David?
I was just going to point out a couple other things. You know, we talk about securing the website against external people or external intruders and stuff. I think a lot of organizations overlook the fact that people can be malicious not purposely as well. I mean, you might get people who have access to the system and they log in and they think they're working on something or doing something correctly, when in fact they might be wiping out your homepage content because they don't know any better. So it's important to make sure that when you're setting up your system and securing things that you're also restricting permissions inside of your work area to your content as well, to the people who should only have access. You get a marketer who comes in and they think that they're editing the piece to their landing page in section B, and instead they're changing their content globally that's going to appear in the footer, and something ends up getting broken there. So security is not necessarily protecting against hackers or intruders, but also making sure that the people who don't necessarily understand the full bounds of the system are only acting within the bounds that you want them to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Chris, I see you nodding along. Anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, well, a little bit. I was actually thinking about what you were talking about with passwords and password management. One big I guess debate over frame of mind is security versus user experience. User experience, being a university is kind of our primary driver for engagement and interaction. In some areas, it may be seen that security, proper security practices, and an ideal user experience may get in each other's way. If you be a little bit more strategic about it, you can avoid things like that. One thing that we've done first and foremost is to kind of two birds with one stone. Is Ektron has the ability to hook into your Active Directory and do LDAP and LDAP-S authentication. So we have that set up right now. So that all login happens not just within the context of the CMS, but over an Active Directory connection too, validating against the the tried and true secure authentication system that you already have. So I see that it makes sense logically to leverage an authentication tool that you have with a tool that can integrate with it.
Yeah, it definitely does, and we use Active Directory here for our internal content authors to work in our authoring environment. Ken McAndrew mentions one security thing you can do if you're not authoring in the production environment is remove the work area login pages, which is true. You could remove any number of pages from the work area, but you can also go into the web config and set the number of tries, the authentication tries down to a negative value, and it's documented inside the web.config. I don't remember the specific values, but you can set those to a couple of different negative value options to either say that CMS users, your authors, are simply not allowed to log in, or you can say nobody is allowed to log in, which is what we do on our own production site. Nobody's allowed to log into production. And we also set the built-in password on our production system to just a random password that we don't write down anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Nobody actually knows the built-in password for our production system. We generate a password, 20 characters or whatever, copy and paste it in, and we don't keep it. We just let it go because there's a utility inside the Ektron installation server that'll let you reset the built-in password when you need to. So if you do need to log into your system, you have to have RDP access into the server in order to run the utility to reset built-in to get into the work area. It's a pain in the butt when you need to do it, but that's a good thing because you want it to be a pain in the butt for anybody who would get in. So, but that built-in account will still work even if you do restrict the other logins, so we don't have to go into the web.config and change that value.
The topic of passwords, actually, this is a pretty good one. Back in the, I'm going to go off to a function or a functionality piece here that's still available. When e-commerce was introduced into the product, one of the things that Ektron had to do was get certified with PCI compliance and PADSS. When they did that, they instituted a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but some settings in the web config and into the product that would allow them to be PCI compliant for somebody who wanted to use it. So the product itself out of the box is not PCI compliant, but it has the basis to follow the PADSS guidelines. And you can Google PADSS if you want to see what it is, but it's just security standards for the payment card industry compliancy. But when they did that, they implemented a key to enable the PCI compliance in the web config, and when you do that, it has an automatic timeout for admins. So if you leave your system idle for, I think, default of 15 minutes, you're automatically logged out of the system. They also enabled the ability to have a password history, so you can actually require people to change the password in the CMS, and it can't match any certain number of passwords back, and you can set the history number. I think default is 4. So it adheres more to a standard like your Active Directory environment would, for instance. There's also the key that James is talking about is the login attempts. Default is set to, I think, 5, somewhere around there, and you can set that to, you know, lower numbers or negative if you want to disable it. If you have compliancy on, it has to be set to a specific number because compliance, PCI compliance will actually force that. But you can enable some of these without even using e-commerce. There's also a password case sensitivity that you can enforce as well, and these are all keys that are within the web config that allow you to secure the environment more. So it's something that could probably be documented a little better in terms of what's available for security, but it's totally worth looking into. And if anyone's on a version older than 9.0, probably I think 8.0 up to 8.5, you can look in the reference guide and I think find stuff about the commerce compliance and password management, password case sensitivity, stuff like that. Might even be something good to blog about.
Yeah, we're not marketing those portions of the product anymore, but they are still there. So if the settings and such haven't changed a whole lot, but you can go back and look at the 9.0 or previous documentation, and most of that will still apply to the 9.1 instance that you might be running. Something else I'll mention is that it is important to make sure you're running the latest and greatest version of Ektron, including service packs and cumulative updates, which you can get through our customer portal. So you don't have to email anybody, no forms to fill out. You just have to be able to log into our portal, and you can go get the cumulative updates, which typically come out every 2 to 3 weeks in a cycle. So it aligns with our agile methodology and engineering. So every couple of weeks there's a new cumulative update. But if you're on the latest and greatest version of Ektron, so if you're on 9.1 SP1, then there are going to be cumulative updates that'll end up getting rolled into the next service pack. And they only include bug fixes at this point. So no new features are being introduced into cumulative updates. They go through QA, they go through testing. So those cumulative updates often contain security fixes. So if you're running 9.1 SP1, then you're doing great. But if you don't have your cumulative updates as well, then you need to go into the portal and grab those updates and get them installed. Something that we introduced not too long ago was some additional web.config files that go into assets and uploaded images and things like that. So basically disables execution within those. So if somebody was able to use Ektron's mechanisms for uploading files, for example, to get a file into one of those folders, they're not executable, or at least not remotely executable files.
While David was talking about the web.config, it reminded me that config files are a place where it's not uncommon to find connection strings and plain text passwords. The best one I can think of is the connection string to the database. That's something if was in somebody's hands, they potentially have the ability to do drops of tables and deletes of content. So where there's opportunities to encrypt those passwords, should they need to be in a plain text type config file, leverage those all across the board.
Yeah, with the config files specifically, you have the option. I could Google it for pull up. You can actually encrypt sections of the web config file completely if you've got the keys installed in your server. So that's something that we definitely do here.
Yeah. So you have to have server access in order to decrypt. So yeah, right. But if you got server access, then you could decrypt it through the command prompt, but you have to have that server access before you can decrypt it. The one thing I'll say is I don't know whether this is still an issue or not, but I know it used to be that If you encrypt a connection string, that could have an impact on async, which relies on those connection strings to transfer data between your authoring production. So yeah, I think as far as I know, anything else inside the web.config is fair game for encryption, but the connection string, if you're using async, you definitely want to test that and make sure that it's not going to cause problems.
Yeah, I know that was a problem a while ago when we there was an article I think that came out about encrypting passwords and stuff for connection strings. I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know whether that's been changed in the last couple of releases, but it very well could have been. But I know that historically you couldn't encrypt the connection string for that reason. But you definitely want to encrypt your cookies because there's information like user IDs and stuff that could get into cookies that you want to make sure are encrypted.
Absolutely, and you can also make it so that you only use HTTPS cookies instead of sending cookies to any request. So if you aren't doing HTTPS for your entire site, it's something that can give you a little bit extra protection in the areas where you are using it.
Yeah, it gives you that transport security. And there's so much that you can do, and I never realized how easily you could hack a site until I got into Pluralsight and started watching the Troy Hunt videos there. We were talking about this before we went live. It's $200 or $300 or something like that to get access to Pluralsight. It's worth that money just to go and watch Troy Hunt's security videos. Something else you can do, especially if this is especially popular in financial institutions, is go 3-tier.
Oh.
Go with a 3-tier. Whether it's MVC or what, but if you go with a 3-tier implementation, then your presentation server just does not have any of that connection string information in the web.config, for example. It's even further removed from the database. It's a whole extra tier removed from the database. You can put the Ektron application behind your firewall, keep the database behind your firewall, and just have a presentation server. You can lose out on some Ektron features right now as the product currently stands, but if security is a major concern for you and it's worth the effort, then you can do a lot of API development. You're not going to get a lot of controls, but if you want to do API development, you can definitely do 3-tier. Synergy is an example of a 3-tier website, and we are able to write registration data back to the Ektron database. We don't store any of the credit card information, of course, but the registrant data does get written back. So you can do communication back to your Ektron application. You can still do forms and collect that data and push it back. All right, so any horror stories that you guys want to share around security? Any guys that you want to share? You don't have to. But if I can share that there were call girl information on developer, I think you guys can.
Yeah, so Johnson & Wales's main website gets hacked by China a couple times every minute. Has been consistently happening for 2 years. We just did a network level rule just to dump that traffic.
We've actually started having that same problem.
Actually, I'm sorry. It's not China. It's a Chinese restaurant around Los Angeles.
Fascinating.
Yeah, we were able to trace it back to an address, and well, there you go.
We back when blogging and commenting were really big features in the site. We used to have some issues with lots of Prada handbags and all the wonderful stuff that you can get in your comment threads.
The Ugg boots, Prada handbags. Yeah, I've seen some of that. The call girls was new. It's the first time I'd seen call girl stuff. Something else.
Really local, like that seems like it would be a really regional thing,
Well, and it was advertised as Dubai. Ektron's not really close to Dubai, so
yeah,
that's a difficult one. That's a challenging. If you really want that call girl, you got to go to the effort.
Maybe you should check your analytics and see if you got a lot of people from Dubai interested in Ektron. Maybe
they want us interested in them, for whatever reason. So something else I'll say on permissions is I have learned the hard way to not give people delete permissions.
Oh, geez, yeah.
I like to bring this up every time we have a webinar. I feel very strongly that it was a really good move when Ektron removed delete permissions from all users. It's a really good thing, and that's why we don't have those problems anymore. Since we can't give you the delete permissions, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. We got rid of the function, at least for Hendrix users.
I can't count the number of times I had to go into a customer site when I worked in best practices and go into the database and recover. Actually, I can recall having to do that since I've been at Celerity for somebody having to go in and recover some deleted files using the history.
Yeah, you go into the history table and you can at least recreate the content. I don't attempt to reset the ID back to what it was, but you can at least retrieve the last version of the content and get it recreated. But the nice thing is we do have the archive feature. So if somebody wants to just simply remove content from the site, you don't have to go to that extreme of deleting, because the situation that I've seen is that they want to take a press release or whatever off of the site, but they end up deleting an entire folder, or they end up deleting an entire taxonomy node, or something like that. And there's just no way to restore that. It's too much. But I do have a strategy, a content strategy. I think I've posted it to the Developer Center. I'll have to dig up the link. But it's just on after content delete or on before content delete, something like that. It writes the data out as JSON to a folder on the server. So if somebody does delete something, I can just go grab it there, and it tells me who deleted it, what it was, get all
the necessary public shaming, right?
For the necessary public shaming, yes. The virtual stoning in the courtyard, yes.
I will say, our first year we had Ektron, we had managed to import all of our previous site content. We had like 10 years of news releases pulled in, and a person who shall not be named managed to delete every single news release from the website by nuking the folder. And ever after that, it seemed Ektron removed permissions to delete the problem again.
We're glad we could help you in that way.
That was quite an intense issue.
We are glad we could help you in that way. We're here to serve, Jay. We're here to serve.
I don't have any security lessons to mention.
None that you want to mention, but at least by name. I'm happy to point out my own foibles on the developer side.
I discovered some. I was there for some security patches that got released when I worked at Ektron. So,
and we've had quite a number released over the last 12 to 18 months as well. There've been a number of things patched, which is all the more reason to do the upgrades and get the cumulative updates.
That's a good point. There was a .NET security issue that came out not too long ago that I think Ektron had to release a service patch for to handle. There
have been some that are just in .NET. Yeah. There have been some that are just in the way XSLT gets processed by .NET that have come up for us, just because we do rely on XSLT, especially inside the work area. We still rely on that technology. So there have been a couple of issues that have come up just because of the technology that we were using that we've had to release patches for. So this is, it's not, I don't want to go in and say, it's not Ektron's fault. I mean, nobody's perfect. We do have flaws. Mm-hmm. But, sometimes it's just a matter of we're using the technology, and the technology has flaws. And that's just the way the world works. It's software built by humans, so it's going to have flaws. Right, so down to the last minute, any final comments, any final thoughts from the three of you, or do we feel like we've covered this?
I would just reiterate, what I think a lot of people have been saying, and that is you really just need to keep an ear to the ground, know that you're never going to have everything protected, but do your best to try to at least keep up. Because if you're not even trying, then you may as well just give your site away now,
Yeah, especially if you're running 8.0 or before or something like that, you're not going to get those updates.
If you fail to try, you try to fail.
Definitely. I don't think anyone needs to go nuts and get paranoid about every time there's something in the news or any potential vulnerability, because every hole that's patched up, somebody will find a way to make another hole and do it. So the best you can do is just cover all your bases at a high level. There's general best practices, common sense stuff that everybody can implement across the board.
Absolutely, and it's good to know how people get in. What are the different ways that people are able to hack your site? And it's not always that they're getting into the database. It's not always they're getting credit card information. Sometimes it's just a matter of they have a a version of Linux and they've got a Conqueror browser that they're able to script mouse movements and stuff, and that's how they were getting into developer. I mean, we could check the logs and we could see they were loading all of the JavaScript and everything, and they're still able to post things in. But it's just about being smart. It's about knowing what the risks are and knowing just how easy it is to hack a site and to make it perform and do things that it wasn't designed to do, because it's ridiculously easy. Once you know how easy it is, the good news is that most of the solutions are easy as well. So indirect object references and things like that you can do that are just easy to implement. It took me maybe 2 hours to put the reCAPTCHA stuff onto the developer side. It's not something that's challenging. It's not something that's time consuming, but it has a significant impact on being able to secure that site.
Yeah, I think one of the key things, people always talk about how you need to be proactive when it comes to security and web security, but I think you also need to be reactive, because like you said, sometimes these people will release stuff or try something new that hasn't been done yet that you haven't even thought of, and it's important to be quick to react to that and take care of it and stay on top of it.
Yeah, which is why I recommend.
Sorry, I'm going to lose the conference room, so I need to say goodbye to everybody.
All right, Chris. Yeah, we
stuff secure, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
So last words of wisdom is just stay up to date, follow Troy Hunt and other security experts on Twitter, keep up with the news, and because most of the time when somebody gets hacked, it's because of something stupid that any of us could prevent, and not all of us are, and that's going to always be the case. But it's not like it's not like Mission Impossible kind of stuff going on for them to get into your site. It's really simple stuff that you can protect against. And with that, Dave and Jay, thank you very much. Always happy to have you as well as Chris. So thanks for joining. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody who paid attention.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for watching, and to those who were commenting on Twitter, which was mostly Ken. Ken's a good guy. Always comments. All right, thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Take care.